Well, welcome everybody. We're going to get started now at 7 o'clock. Thank you all for coming. This series of lectures is put on by the Victor Historic Advisory Committee. We're a town committee, and we sort of help abet in looking at problems and trying to preserve the history of Victor. We thought one way to do it would be to have a series of talks. I mean, we've just been very fortunate to have some very good people give lectures and talk about some very interesting things with Victor. So before introduce Jason, let me just point out that we're going to be taking a break after this lecture tonight, and we'll start up again in April. So the winter months we're going to close down, see how that works, and then start up again in April. In April, Pat Bolger is going to be talking about future farmers back in the 1950s and the history of the Blasey farm, and he's got a promotion that they ran back then that's available on YouTube that really talks about a young man coming from, I think, the Midwest someplace, coming to Farmington and working on a farm in Farmington, and then it's a promotion to talk about farming. So that should be interesting. On Thursday, May 5th, John Marks, who is the historian from Geneva, is going to be talking on the Phelps and Gorham Purchase. And you may think of it as just dry old history, but it turns out that almost all of our town lines were drawn back by these promoters from New England who, sight unseen, sat down with the map and drew out the town lines, drew up subdivisions or small farms and sold them off. So it's a very interesting story, and John is a great speaker. And then on June 2nd, Mary Sue Holtz, who is an art teacher at school, is going to be talking about the history of the Victor schools, looking at it through the yearbooks. The Victor yearbook was started by Eleanor Berry when she first became a teacher, and she was hired specifically by Elton Corbett and told, you have to start a yearbook. So the yearbook goes back to Eleanor's time. And having been through it, and the Victor schools have almost a complete collection, going through a collection of yearbooks, seeing how styles change and the role of women in the schools and the opportunities for women in the schools, how that's changed, and then seeing how the size of the school has changed just exponentially over the years. So we have some great talks coming up in the spring, but tonight it's Jason Shelton, and Jason is a school teacher at Edison and teaches 9th grade social studies. Dear to my heart, I taught 9th grade social studies for about 8 or 9 years at Victor, and the seniors would always come to me and commiserate, and they said, how could you stand us when we were that age? And I would continually have to tell, especially the young women, I'd say, give the boys a chance. In a year or two, they're going to figure out what's going on and they're going to grow up. But at 9th grade, it's a real challenge. And so, Jason, welcome tonight. And Jason is a longtime member of the fire department and is on the history committee for the fire department, and we'll be talking about the history of the Victor Fire Department. Jason?
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to try and use the technology. Susie to tell me how to do it. Sweet. Okay. So I guess any good history starts at the beginning. So there's going to be a series of 9 fires that occur in the village of Victor in the years 1898 through 1899. Thanks. Sorry, it's been a long day. So what's going to happen in the village is it's going to start a serious conversation of fire protection, and at the time, the only tools they have to fight these fires are a few hand pumps and buckets. And William Gillis, first character in the story, actually is going to be the editor of the Victor Herald, and numerous times advocate for some sort of measures to help prevent fires and to keep the possible damage of fires to a minimum. And unfortunately, in a series fire that you see pictured, the aftermath, on Easter Sunday, William Gillis will die of a heart attack on Main Street while trying to help neighbors get belongings out of buildings on East Main Street. So the top picture and the picture below it, what you're seeing is that's East Main Street, so like right out here, the devastation. On the right hand, you see the village's attempt to take control and kind of mitigate the possibility of destruction from fire. And it's an ordinance that regulates the building construction material. Wood would no longer be allowed. It would be brick, it would be metal roofs, and the penalty for any failure to comply was $50 per instance. The village also puts before voters the idea of a water system to help, and it's voted down by village residents. Finally, on June 8th, 1904, the Victor Fire Department is formed by the village of Victor as part of the village government. And a few years later, in 1907, the village finally put in a water system. So here you see a picture of the first members of the Victor Fire Department back in 1904. They're going to meet, and their first fire chief, H.J., okay, Gerald, I'm going to say it wrong, Hoykendall. Every time I say it wrong. Thank you, Gerald. 3 companies will be formed: hook and ladder, engine, and hose, each with a different function at fires. And today in 2021, those 3 companies still exist, more as a tradition. When a new member joins the fire department, or now the fire district, they are assigned to a company. Even though there's 3, we all know hook and ladder is the best company. The first official act of the firefighters was to appoint 2 members to stand on the stage of the Victor Town Hall during town hall meetings to ensure public safety. VFD is originally going to be not in a building, but in the offices up above the Gallup building, so where Hopper Hills Florist is and Osmond's Taylor, they met in those upstairs rooms. Their first official fire will be 6 months after the founding, and it will be at the cooper shop of George Murphy. And they must have done an okay job because the building's still there. It's actually on West Main Street. It's the Red Lawyer's office on the left if you're heading towards the mall. At the end of 1904, there was a roster of 31 members of the Victor Fire Department, which in less than a year's time, that's pretty impressive. The first fire carnival was held on April 24th and 25th, 1905. And the budget was a whole $10. But it was money well spent because they brought in $596. Sorry, $569. So we're looking at pictures of the original firehouse for the Victor Fire Department. The village board approved a bid by Charles Longyear in 1910 to build a firehouse for the staggering amount of $2,590. A steam fire whistle is going to be installed at Victor Insulator. Before that was installed, there was actually a fire bell at the First Presbyterian Church. And eventually, there will actually be a siren put on 5 West Main Street, the original firehouse. It served as the fire department and village hall until 1968, then served as village offices until 1984. At that point, the village sells it. It's going to become private businesses. There's a few pizza shops at various times. Jeffrey Fuels will have offices there. And then eventually the Victor Fire Department Incorporated will buy it. The private membership, non-for-profit, will, with money from the local development corporation, will purchase it. And to date, it remains an asset of the Victor Fire Department, Inc., used for a museum and a lounge upstairs for our members. And the bottom right hand, that's the plaque that our wonderful town historian, Babette Huber, gave to us in 2010 on the 100th anniversary of the building. And Babette, I promise at some point it will actually get hung up on the building. It's a slow process. So at the top, you're looking at a picture that was taken in 2010 after the building got a paint job. Down below, you see past chief and mayor of the village, Michael Comiso, at the dedication ceremony held after Victor Fire Department, Inc. purchased the building and refurbished it. There's a ribbon cutting, I'm sorry, that you see. And in the center of the picture, there's Mike Mazzolio, the state senator, Joe Arrigo, Fire Chief John McConnell, and President at the time, Gerald Berry, who's actually in our audience. This is the dedication plaque that hangs in 5 West. One of the key figures in getting it, besides President Berry, was Treasurer Michael Comiso, who served on the village board. And from what I'm told, I was not a member at the time, he put a lot of blood, sweat, and equity into the building. And when he passed away in January 2006, after that time, the membership voted to name the building in honor of him. So the picture you see is the second fire chief of the Victor Fire Department, Homer Snyder. I refer to him as our Mickey Mouse, because after many years of being in the department and then eventually passing away, he still gets votes from time to time in department elections. When somebody doesn't like somebody on the ballot or just wants to be a goofball, Homer Snyder gets a vote. And there's been a few times where he's actually thrown a vote off, and we've had to have a second round of balloting. Our chief, Glenn Lockwood, still, I talked to him a few weeks ago, talks about how when he was running for an assistant chief back in the late 70s, he couldn't win on the first ballot because Homer Snyder got just enough votes. And every time I'm feeling a little crazy, there's a sign-up sheet. I'll just randomly put Homer Snyder's name up. This is a picture from the 1932 clam bake. The 1930s was a very interesting time for the fire department. Our first motorized fire apparatus, which we still own today, the 1931 Buffalo, housed in 5 West Main Street, was purchased. There was also a big fire, not in Victor, but in Canandaigua, at the Knights of Columbus building, which is down near where like KFC used to be, down Lakeshore Drive. And according to records, and we didn't know this until Canandaigua's fire chief did a series of articles at their 200th anniversary, there was some problems during the fire, and a bunch of firefighters, including 4 Victor firefighters, one of them being the fire chief, actually were hospitalized at what is now Thompson Hospital for smoke inhalation. Of course, pictured to the right is the 1931 Buffalo with the driver that I think is pretty well known throughout the town of Victor, Don Green. Past chief. Unfortunately, we did lose Don this year. But he's also on the top picture on the very left. It's a young Donald Green. And the story that he always told was that he wanted to be a member in the worst possible way. But for the longest time, he couldn't because the requirements were you had to be a village resident. And finally, in 1956, the Victor Fire Department changed the policy, and you could be a member living outside of the village. And Donald Green was the first member admitted to the department from outside the village of Victor. When we get to the 1960s, Victor's growing, not as much as it's growing today, but it was starting to grow, and they needed to meet the needs of the community and needed a bigger firehouse. So they're going to have a new one constructed at the site of the current firehouse. Adams Street did not exist at the time. So for the amount of $160,000, the new firehouse was constructed on Maple Avenue. You see an article. The truck bay is actually faced out on Maple Avenue. And where the current truck bays are in the new building, that was all parking. You see the dedication plaque at the bottom left. That still hangs in our firehouse today. And in the picture on the right, then Mayor William O'Brien is handing the keys to the firehouse to Chief Jack Berry. A president at the time was Frank Commisso, so a lot of familiar last names. There's a picture of what it looked like. There's some inside pictures. So you have the truck bay. So it's a little tight. You have the radio room, which was in the center of the truck bays. Or no, I'm sorry, like in between the truck bays. And then the kitchen, which any members who were there, am I wrong in saying those pictures make it look big? I was in there once and I got claustrophobia. Also inside the firehouse was a large meeting room, and in the back row, there's a bunch of really comfy chairs from what I'm told. I never got to see these chairs, but they were reserved for what I'm told was called the Senate. So past chiefs, past presidents, long-serving members, they got the comfy chairs. Gerald, did you ever get a chair? Sorry, didn't mean to open up old wounds. And of course, we can't have a history of the fire department without talking about the one of the largest fires, April 1981. The chief went by the name of Glenn Lockwood. Might sound familiar. He's also our current chief. A little trivia. The youngest chief in Victor Fire Department history was Glenn Lockwood. I probably shouldn't say this, but he acknowledges that the oldest chief in Victor Fire Department history is Glenn Lockwood. And he actually became chief again right about 40 years after he originally became chief. So that's pretty amazing. So Chief Lockwood did respond. Fortunately, he lived right over there, up the hill a little bit, so very quick commute. It's going to really change the way the village is. That headline's not lying. If you're familiar with village government, you know that the village has a little thing called the Urban Renewal Agency. It was founded after this, really to address the devastation of this fire to that part of the business district. One of my favorite stories, and I did not know this until the individual in question passed away, and it was shared by our chaplain, was that John Dreyer, who was a town justice, was a member of the fire department, and he was doing traffic control after the fire. And somebody gave him a hard time, a motorist. Well, he turned the matter over to a sheriff's department officer who, according to the story, gave the guy a ticket and said, "Good luck. That was the judge you just gave a hard time to." I made inquiries. I never found out how it turned out for that guy, but I'm going to go with not good. The other thing I noted here was you hear stories of the kindness of the fire departments around us, who not only showed up to help fight it, but, you know, Gerald Berry, you were there. There was a lot of hose, and the story goes that a lot of these fire departments showed back up to help with the hose and help clean up the mess. So that's always something that I love about the fire service, is how you help each other out. But you're not going to believe this. Victor keeps growing. So the fire department we had, oh, there's Chief Lockwood at the time. Forgot about that one. He loves that picture. So Victor keeps growing. The needs of the fire department keeps growing. So in the early 2000s, we're going to need a new firehouse to better help us help the community. This picture I call last night. It was taken by then Assistant Chief, future Chief Robert Green, the son of Donald Green, the last night that the trucks were actually in the truck bays, before demolition and construction began on the new firehouse. So in the top left, you see the conceptual drawing for the new firehouse. In the bottom right, you have the groundbreaking. You have then Chief John McConnell, who's currently on the District Board of Commissioners. You have Village Board Member and member of the Fire Department, Michael Comiso. A then President, Gerald Berry, who's currently on our Board of Fire Commissioners. Then Village Mayor, Tom Walker. Then Village Trustee, Larry Rhodes. And then Town Supervisor, Jack Richter. So there you see the dedication plaque. a picture of the new firehouse upon its completion, and a sign very happy of the fact that not only it's the holidays, but we're home again. They were back in a fire department, not having meetings in Mickey Finn's and trucks over at the town barns. And this is a current picture. It's one of my favorite. On the left, you see the newest truck that's brand new to the Victor Fire Department, purchased in 2015 for just over $1 million. It's our new Quint. And then, of course, the oldest apparatus in the fleet, the 1931 Buffalo. There's been major changes. And one of the things that I'm proud to say the fire department's done is when they built the current firehouse, they built it with the future in mind. They knew the town was growing. They knew they would need to grow and their needs would change along the way. So there were actually rooms that were vacant. I remember when I joined in 2007 that there was this huge room up by like the officers' offices that was just vacant. I think it had some storage stuff. And I asked my brother, who was a lieutenant at the time, why is there just this empty room? We couldn't find something to do with it. And he said, no, it's for the future, when we need additional room. And that was a good plan because now it's the fitness room. We had rooms that were empty for the longest time that we use for bunkings. So when the weather gets bad, sometimes you have people staying overnight, or, as reality hits in, that more and more paid firefighters will be added to our rosters. They need a place to sleep if they're ever asked to stay overnight. So big change for the fire department. In 2016, 2017, 2018, you have major changes in village government and town government. Then Governor Cuomo came out with a little thing called the 2% tax cap, which really wasn't 2% tax cap. So villages and towns and municipalities were being asked to do more and more with less and less. And it was sort of setting up a conflict where the DPW had their needs and wants, and the fire department had their needs. And the village was kind of struggling with how to fund both. So after conversations with Fishers, who approached the village and wanted to join, debates were held, discussions were had. The Victor Town Board said, sure, we'll vote for that, and they did. The village board did the same. And then it went to the Fishers Commission. Everyone thought, oh, it's a done deal. They asked for it. By 3-2 vote, it was defeated. In the aftermath of that, the Victor Fire Department went through the process and got, through a vote of the village residents, permission to become a Victor Fire District. And we're no longer under the village of Victor. It's not a reflection on the village trustees. It's just a reality of the situations. We felt that it would be more effective to be our own district and have commissioners elected by the people, and that was their sole job. They didn't have to worry about other departments. And if you look at village board meeting minutes of the time, a lot of their meetings were being taken up by fire department business. So Bob, you weren't on when the district went through, were you?
Came on just as it was in process, yes.
Okay, so I think it's safe to say that your agendas kind of got a little lighter after the fire department went away?
A little bit, and you did a nice job of summarizing the story of what happened.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's why you asked me to do this. plus nobody else said yes. So in June 2019, the Victor Fire Commission District was officially formed with 5 commissioners appointed at first, and now they are elected. And each one of them serves a 5-year term, and the elections for commissioner and other proposals occur in early December. Gerald, do you know the date for this year? The 14th of December. So if you live in the town of Victor, on this end, please make sure that you vote. Voting occurs at the Victor Fire Department. So recently, I'm going to get in trouble if I... Is it public knowledge that we hired someone?
We hired 2.
Okay, so we hired 2. I didn't want to get myself in trouble. I didn't want Gerald waiting for me out in the back parking lot. I'm not a good fighter.
We'll hire the second one next Tuesday night.
Okay, so you heard it here first, folks. We've officially hired 2 firefighters,
Female and a male.
a female and a male. See, I live down in Painted Post now, so I don't always hear this stuff right away. So, you know, this was not an easy decision, but the reality is, as you look at the trends, not just in Victor, but in the state of New York and across the country, it's harder to get volunteers. Family commitments are growing. More and more people are having to work multiple jobs. In Victor, one of our biggest obstacles is the cost of living. We lose a lot of young, really good firefighters because they just can't afford to live here. So they end up moving to other places. Also, you know, the days of a lot of people working around the village and being able to get out for a call isn't as realistic. Plus, the requirements keep going up. In large part, New York State keeps adding hours to courses. In 2007, I took a course for what's called fire police or traffic control, and it was 9 hours. If you take it today, it's 21 hours. Same material, just a little more wasted time. But because classes take longer, because departments are having to train more as technology and legal requirements are added, it's harder to volunteer. Truth be told, I've been asked, now that I've moved in the spring down near Painted Post, why don't I join down there? And the honest answer is I don't have the time. So I see why we have trouble getting volunteers. So unfortunately, as that continues, you'll probably see more and more paid staff added. Okay, I must have set like the record for the shortest so far, because I would like to thank Bob Kelly, Babette Huber, who did a lot of the research in her different books that I borrowed from. Thank you. And I'd like to thank you all for coming. I guess everyone else has been taking questions at these, so I'll take any questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll make something up. Probably shouldn't say that on YouTube.
Jason,
Yes.
in the 50s or 60s, if you were having a fire and you needed to contact the fire department, how did people do it back then? What was how the word, did you call, I mean, you didn't have 911 back then, what did you do?
So, I actually know the answer to this because Vic Tischer wrote a book. Or no, his son Fran did. And it tells the story of there was a phone number, and you called it, and there was actually a person dedicated who had a phone. And when there was a call, she became the center of attention, the focus of all the activity, and she would alert and start the process to get the volunteers to the firehouse and to the scene. Yes, sir.
fire in the corner here in Victor, what was the cause of that?
I honestly do not know. Yeah, there's rumors that it was electrical, but I've never officially heard, and
Jason, one other question. Back in the early days, if there was a fire on Cherry Street, someone's barn was burning down, what happened?
they would get word to the fire department, and the fire department would come.
Would they actually come into the town?
Cherry Street is in Bloomfield, so,
But-
okay, so yeah.
Closer.
So originally, it was a village fire department, so they wouldn't leave, and it's really right up in the 50s, 60s where you start seeing them go more mutual aid, outside of what they're required by mutual aid laws.
So if you were a farmer and had a barn, it was, you did your own firefighting.
Yeah, and you know, you think about it, Fisher's fire didn't come along until 1921, so, you know, even parts of the town were unprotected.
Calls do you get a year?
I want to say in like the 350 range. Oh, 400. I'm being told 400. This year, 400. Math is not my strong suit.
So how many of them are fires and how many of them are nuisance calls?
What?
Roughly 5%.
So if you didn't hear that, and for people on YouTube, 5% of the calls are in the fire category. A lot of the rest are automatic alarms, car crashes, CO2. The school is a frequent flyer, although they have gotten better. And we do respond to certain medical calls. So when the ambulance might be tied up, we'll go to help until they can get an ambulance there. A cardiac arrest we'll respond to.
Have you had more calls for health reasons because of COVID?
Not to my knowledge. It seemed COVID really wasn't a factor. Largely because we only respond to certain medical calls, so it doesn't really affect us unless the ambulance is tied up and can't get some mutual aid there right away. Alrighty, thank you so much.
Jason, thank you so much. Just a thank you for Jason for volunteering to speak, and also thank you for your service in the fire department. I know that there are quite a few others here that are serving the fire department. Thank you for your service also. It's a wonderful thing. And thank you all for coming tonight. Good night.